A game synonymous with geek culture of the 80s gets yet another stab at a mass appeal adaptation. Previous attempts on TV and movies have waffled between comedy lampooning the genre or being serious in nature but embarrassed to source material. Will this latest try to capture the hearts of children who want to play the game while appeasing the nostalgia of the old men who played it long ago? In the end, it's all about selling toys, pajamas, and cereals. But that's enough about Super Mario. We're talking about Dungeons & Dragons today. Welcome to Afterthoughts. I'm doing some hosting duties today. This is Ryan King, and I'll go ahead and jump around the panel and introduce everybody before we start talking about the movie. Today we've got John Garcia.
Hey.
See, this is where I could do a light Dungeons & Dragons thing.
You could, yeah. Please don't call me the Grand Wizard. Please don't do that.
I wanted to say wizard.
You can call me wizard. Just
don't
Grand
say
Great
not
wizard.
Grand Wizard. Yes. With me today, we have our wizard, John Garcia.
Actually a cleric in level 4. I have a trick god as my divinity. I do play Dungeons & Dragons occasionally, if you can't tell, but I don't know enough about it to bullshit my way through that opener.
That's as good as we're getting, I think.
Yes, that's exactly it.
Our resident paladin, Dixon.
You guys are a bunch of fucking nerds. I have never played Dungeons & Dragons before, and I was very confused by this movie, so...
And we have our guest NPC for this session, Parker.
Hello. I feel like you were about to go with a rogue, and that probably would have fit pretty well.
Yeah, you have to roll your own class as you come in as a guest, so...
This is all right over my head.
We watched Dungeons & Dragons: Honor Among Thieves.
Truth be told, we helped the wrong person steal the wrong thing. We didn't mean to unleash the greatest evil the world has ever known. But we're gonna fix it.
So how do we pull that off? Figure it out over a drink?
Probably best. We're gonna need strength. You got this, right?
I know you don't.
We also need courage, magic, and what is that again? It's an owlbear.
What is it exactly that you bring to this?
I'm a planner. I make plans.
You've already made the plan, so...
If the existing plan fails, I make a new plan.
So you make plans that fail?
No.
He also plays the lute.
Not relevant.
Dungeons & Dragons: Honor Among Thieves tells the story of Edgin the Sad Dad, a once noble snitch turned thief looking to atone for poor parenting. Together with his barbarian bestie Holga, he'll travel far and wide, assembling a party of cardboard-thin characters to save his estranged daughter from the evil clutches of Hugh Grant. Also, there's some bit about stopping an evil red wizard from red wizarding all over the citizens of Green Screen City. But enough about that. Roll for initiative.
This is how we tricked Dixon into watching a fantasy Marvel movie.
You took my joke.
Yes, we did.
Yeah, I will start it off by saying I actually watched 3 movies in the movie theater this weekend. A very rare thing for me. Yeah, very, very rare thing to do. And this, for Dungeons & Dragons, I took my son along. So he's the only one old enough, I guess, ish to watch it, and the only one as dumb as me to watch it. And due to trying to schedule in 3 movies on the weekend, we ended up picking the time that was the most convenient and ended up watching it in Screen X.
It's a porno theater, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah. We went to the porn theater Screen X to watch Dungeons & Dragons: The colon was a different thing in this one.
With his son.
I'm going to try my best to describe this. There's just an extra set of projectors along the side walls that then are projecting on the side walls, and you sort of get the IMAX experience where you kind of there's too much shit going on all around you that you have to look at.
Is there like extra movie that I didn't get in my normal theater that you got on the walls? Is this like super wide format?
Yeah, for the most part, one, it wasn't every scene, so it was distracting because it kind of came and went.
Oh, yeah.
Cool.
So I would say like maybe 75% of the movie, anytime they were inside or any kind of like emotional scene, we were usually just in the normal format and the sides were off. Anytime we were outside, the sides were like fucking mountains and trees and shit just off in the peripheral. It added nothing to the experience. If anything, it was distracting.
Wait, but Ryan, I have an important question about ScreenX. Did they have the thank you for coming to the theater message in ScreenX?
Oh,
Was there like an
Yes,
extra? Okay.
You know who the real heroes are? You guys, the audience.
Yeah, it was that, except on the right and left was like the boom mic and a rider, a couple of riders, and a guy with a cue card.
The stagehand that stepped out of sight. They realized
like
they were in the
drinking
frame.
Yeah, so you didn't miss anything because, like, at most, I did notice there were some times that, like, actual principal actors were on the side, but maybe twice. It was honestly just, like, extras and mainly just scenery.
The aspect ratio of the movie is already 2:3:9:1. Like, this is already shot in ultra wide. Did they shoot this in, like, a 3:1?
I was trying to look into it because, kind of like 3D, they either do it pre-production or IMAX on it. Like they plan to do it that way, or someone fucking hacks it together in post. I think this one was done pre-production, like that it was planned, hence it only being in like certain scenes. And it seemed like I always had the right, like I kind of like try to put my mind on like, okay, if I was actually looking at this screen, does it make sense where everyone's like standing and how they're interacting? Am I getting all the things that would normally be in frame? And I think I did. So I think that this one, they did just film some extra scenes, I guess, in an even wider lens. Yeah, I don't know. And then went back to normal for other stuff.
Getting the sense that Ryan is stalling for time because he doesn't have a lot to talk
all
about
right.
with this movie.
So anyway, it's a slightly above middle Marvel movie, I would say. It definitely has the Guardians of the Galaxy Suicide Squad kind of feel to it, I think, as far as they're concerned, right? We kind of have this like group of people, they each fill a different role, and a different kind of personality type, and we kind of just go along on our adventure. I will honestly say the digital effects were not as bad as a Marvel movie. I actually think they worked fine.
Low
because
bar.
The bar is pretty low, but there was never a time where I was like, okay, that's not a human, flying around on the screen. That's some bullshit. It looked fine. Like I never really got taken out of it. There were some action scenes. We can talk about some particular ones that I actually thought were pretty smart in like how the action went through and like what the plan was and how you kind of got to follow it through. That felt to me like the kind of thing that if you were playing a D&D game and you guys did that, everyone would have a really fucking good time talking about like, oh man, you won't believe what we did with this thing. We did this and stole this thing and it was really awesome. And I think the characters were like as much as they needed to be. Like these aren't great character depths. The ending of the movie, there's definitely a point where like it's all the chess pieces are on the board and you're like, all right, well, I know what's happening. Like,
yes.
I know why there's a crowd. I know why there's this tournament. I know what the hell they're going to end up using the Immortal tablet on. Like everything is just like, all right, I know where this is going. And it was still enjoyable. Like it was still fine. I do think it removes some of the emotional, like supposed tugs at the end because I'm just kind of like, well, it's magic. It doesn't fucking matter. Yeah. It's going to get solved kind of thing. But like overall, like it, and just because I mentioned it earlier, it's fucking better than the Super Mario movie.
Yeah.
Like, which is also a very low bar.
Yep.
So I give it like it was fine. And my son liked it and I enjoyed myself and I actually laughed and liked the action scenes. Am I going to be like, oh guys, you got to run out and watch this or anything like that? I do want to take an aside on Super Mario later because we can distract ourselves temporarily.
We're going to put that in a separate episode for you.
We'll put a pin in that. Yeah.
What was the third movie that you watched in theaters this week?
We'll get that on the.
Okay.
We'll do the recommend and refute. I'll get to it on recommend and refute. I will say for a family watching, I had wondered if I could have brought my daughter, she's 10, to it, and I kind of debated and I looked at stuff and it didn't look like it was too bad. Having watched it, I think it was perfectly fine, honestly.
Oh yeah.
Like it had the like Bart Simpson level of cussing. I think there wasn't really any blood anywhere, and most of the deaths were like, dudes in armor that I couldn't even fucking see what happened to them. And there was one like guy who gets his neck cut, but you can't. It's kind of off screen too. So it was fine, and it was also again like all magic and bullshit. So you don't feel bad about it.
The bad guys are really bad guys.
Yes.
Right. Yeah, that's true. I guess that one person did like turn a whole city into zombies or eat them or something. I'm not entirely sure what happened there, but Dixon, we'll just go right to
rip the Band-Aid off.
Yeah, let's just cut
so
it.
my joke was going to be, this is the best Marvel movie I've seen in years.
That
doesn't mean it was good.
High-low praise.
Yeah. I gave this a 2.5 on Letterboxd, and my review was just why. This was enjoyable. It was funny. Like, the Chris Pine is always a lot of fun. You know, he's just a very witty guy, you know, very quick-witted, good banter. I always like him and Michelle Rodriguez. I thought they had a good dynamic together. There were lots of jokes throughout the movie that I found myself laughing at, like falling through the orifice into the cave thing and like other things like that had me laughing. I didn't give a shit about any of the characters, and I just kept, like, everything was just fucking fetch quests the whole time. It's like, now we got to go get this thing to unlock this thing so we can get this next thing to go to this next place to get this next thing. And I was just like, oh my God, like, when is this going to be over? Like, what's going on? Like, it was... Like, I didn't hate watching it, but I was just like, it just felt so empty. It was just like eating a shitload of candy. And then at the end, just being like, all right, I need to go throw up now. So, yeah, I don't know. I just didn't really understand like what the point of this was really, other than for Hasbro to try to make some money off its IP because they haven't made a Transformers movie in a while, you know, and like, it felt like they were really trying to copy the Guardians of the Galaxy format, and they did a good job reproducing that. Chris Pine is way better than Chris Pratt, so you know, like that's fine with me. But yeah, I mean, overall, I was just like, like I don't really get this. I have never played Dungeons and Dragons. I don't know how this relates to the game at all. It just seemed like an excuse to tell a fantasy story and like slap some known IP on it. But curious to hear from you guys if it's any more than that, or if it's as shallow as it seemed to me. But yeah, why don't we open the floor to our guest Parker and get your thoughts on the film before we kick it over to John.
Yeah, so I think that's actually a perfect segue because I do play quite a bit of D&D.
Okay, awesome.
I actually play text D&D consistently throughout the day, every day.
What's that?
Our DM is just super into playing, and
you can play like throughout the day.
We know each other so well, and there's only 2 players, so it's not a lot of like, you know, back and forth, and we're able to just kind of communicate, and we don't get a lot done or anything like that, but it's a really good void.
You can have a few moves a day or something.
Yeah, exactly. And whenever you're not in combat, you're able to just like fly through things in a breeze. I accidentally set a town into a whirlwind and like destroyed a whole bunch of cities and like killed a bunch of people on accident because I misread a text. So, that's fun. But yeah, no, I really enjoyed this movie. It might be because I was coming into it with the idea that it was going to be, you know, just another like cash grab. Hasbro is on my shit list right now.
Just right now?
Very much so. You know, like I put them in the back of my mind. Transformers was okay to me. You know, Michael Bay is Michael Bay, but the first one was fun, and I was a teenager, and I wanted to see Optimus Prime on screen. But nowadays, they're fucking with my Magic the Gathering, and that's really annoying.
Oh man,
they own all the nerd shit.
They own so much nerd shit because they bought Wizards of the Coast. Yeah. No, but
nerd monopolies. We gotta break up the nerd monopolies.
Yes,
I'm down. Let's take him to court. How much do we bribe Clarence Thomas?
Oh wow, he's got a pretty big price tag. I don't know. Plus, I think he likes monopolies.
Hey, so Clarence, we've got another mic. If you're interested in being a star,
calling you out, bud. But
maybe if we let Ginny on the podcast, he'll do it. She seems to be the one that wants the fame.
She has his ear. Yeah. Oh yeah. No, but the directors of this movie, they definitely like. It was John Francis Daley and Jonathan Goldstein. I'm looking up. Oh, why is Matt Mercer on here? That's probably not true.
Consulted?
Maybe. Yeah. But both of them were like avid D&D players, and both of them worked on Spider-Man: Homecoming.
Oh, okay.
So they're definitely familiar with the Marvel formula. I think they did a really good job with this one and kind of like pulled all the punches, or I guess didn't pull any punches with like the comedy. It's definitely a comedy action first thing and foremost.
Mm-hmm.
But I really dug just like, what they did with the cinematography. I think the casting it worked well. Really, like the only down thing is like the story is, like y'all said, just really empty and kind of nothing. But all of the source material is fantastic. Like they kind of, changed a couple of names on things just for ease of players or viewers,
Mm-hmm.
but for the most part, like all of the settings that you saw and that's all been in D&D since the 70s.
Oh, okay.
The displacer beast, the gelatinous cube, everything that
the fat dragon,
showed.
the absolute unit.
The absolute unit is a fan favorite. That dude is a glutton. Oh my god, and he was my favorite. I that scene was goofy, but it was very fun. Like
it was funny to see an obese dragon.
You don't see those a lot these days.
No, yeah.
And that was
HBO's all about making sexy dragons. We need to see some fat
Film
dragons.
these dragons fucking these nude dragon scenes.
Whoa. But yeah, the physical comedy was really great. Whether it be the CG, which was pretty well done, as I agree as well. All of the spell casting was really great. And actually, I watched this on release, so it was a couple of weeks ago. So I was watching little videos to kind of get a recap, and I didn't realize that apparently the spell casting that the
Justice Smith's character
Justice
does?
Smith uses is a lot of sign language. It has American sign language built into it. So
that's
really
cool. That's an interesting
That's cool.
remix.
Yeah.
Is he the shitty sorcerer?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. And his great grandfather is a real character. He's also another fan favorite that people wanted to see. Nobody wants to see. Like,
yeah.
The only person that anybody would want to see is Dritz. That guy's like,
the fat dragon. That's what you're talking about. That's the name. No, I'm just kidding.
Sorry, no. He's a drow guy. R.A. Salvatore wrote a whole bunch of books for him. That guy.
Already getting into the stuff I don't know.
Sorry, yeah, that's a little too deep. My bad. I'll pull back. Don't
take us into the Underdark. That's what I remember.
The Underdark.
But no, yeah, I thought that the color gradient was really good, and they did a great job with the cinematography, and they made the action sequences work pretty well, and it was just a lot of comedy, a lot of physical. Even the action was comedy action.
Yeah,
it was good. So I'll kick it over to John.
Yeah, as somebody who has a very limited experience with D&D, I've played with 3 different groups and I've bailed on all 3. That is a time-honored tradition for a D&D person.
The true player.
Yes. So I kind of want to give a little bit of grounding for what D&D is. I was going to suggest that, Parker, you do it, but I also didn't want to risk you pulling us into the rule books potentially.
Yeah, I can do that. No, you're much better suited for this.
But yeah, so Dixon, for you, D&D is a game that you can play. Basically, it is just having one person be a storyteller and everybody else at the table does anything they want to. And that is anything. And it can frustrate the hell out of the person that is supposed to be leading you because somebody will go off for weeks and make a storyline and everything. And then you will just instead fucking kill the entire town that had people in it that were supposed to do things and get in this position where you're like, what do we fucking do now? I don't know. Let's open a store. Or you can literally
for no one to come to.
Yeah. Like I've been a part of a party that tried to push socialism into a capitalist dwarven town and a bunch of other shit that's happened where we were trying to do this and the DM was really I am not a poli-sci mage. I can't do this shit. So it's just really flexible and kind of fun. And it gives you a safe space to be an actor and try to be a different role that you would normally not be. Tough guy or weak person or whatever you want to try to manipulative, that kind of stuff. So for me to see this, it really did feel like one of those one-off campaigns where, you got to go get the thing to get the other thing. That's how any campaign starts when you're reading from the playbook. So I was like, all right, cool. I understand that this is going to have almost no gravity to a lot of it. The characters, even establishing Chris Pine's emotional investment in his daughter was pretty weak. But I look for, with this movie, I went in thinking, yes, this will basically be the D&D Marvel movie. And I was like, well, I just want to watch and see if the action is legible. Can I visibly see what's going on when things are happening? And then what amount of detail are they pumping into it without being ham-fisted? Because in Mario, everything is right up front. It's oh, that's the poison mushroom. Oh, it's the blue shell. Oh, they fucking say that shit all the time. And then in D&D, it's literally just like, nope, we're not going to tell you what the fuck that is. We're just going to move past that. Here's a proper noun. Fuck you. We're going to go over here. This has something to do with the story. And it makes it seem, I think, to like a critical eye, it feels like all these MacGuffins. But then when you're actually into D&D like Parker is, I assume there's a lot of layers being peeled back where you're like, okay, that makes perfect sense. Oh, yes, of course they would have this. Oh, they found that thing? All right, sure. Like that could just be there. The one thing that I really like, we've all mentioned the CGI here, is the fact that they use practical effects for a lot of things. They have puppets. And I haven't seen a fantasy movie that tries to use puppets, even puppets that look bad. Like the fucking cat people puppets in this were hilarious to me. But also I was like, they fucking tried. They tried to put little puppet cats with like eyes that close and shit. And I was just like impressed with the amount of that they were trying to merge. And I could definitely tell it was like, there was a certain point, I feel like, where the creatives behind it were like, can we just do all practical? And Hasbro was like, no. And the studio was like, no. And so they were like, fuck, we'll do practical where we can and then CGI the rest in. That's kind of what I love about fantasy films. For some reason, when I watched this, I thought of Beastmaster. And I was just like, Beastmaster has a lot of animal abuse for the sake of practical effects. It's fucking awful. But it's still one of those things where like, you just don't see too many fantasy films now where it's not like, oh, that's a green screen and they're talking to a green screen monster. Like the dragon people here are actual like puppets, I'm pretty sure too. The way that they talk and their mouths kind of actuate is fascinating to me. And just all of the, even Jonathan, my favorite character, Jonathan, the fucking Birdman that gets thrown out of a window. It's literally anybody's escape plan. Like that shit was funny to me. It was so good. And I think that the practical kind of nailed how goofy it was and how it didn't take itself seriously. Like it was here for the slapstick.
Well, it would have looked so ugly if they would have done
CGI, like Chris Pine hugging a CGI Birdman and whatever. It would have been shit, like just awful. But I came for that. I got that. The only thing that made my experience really frustrating was the dude next to me who was texting on his phone and taking pictures of the fucking movie every 20 minutes, which like, I just don't know. I don't understand what he was doing. But yeah, like outside of that, from what I remember, because he distracted me for the first half, the latter half was pretty fun and I had a good time with it. I was also, because the characters were so hollow, even though I was distracted for the first half, I was able to latch right back in easily on the second half.
Immediately.
Wait, what did I miss? Oh, they just got a couple things that they had to get for no reason to get the next thing. Cool. All right,
what's that? The walking staff is actually some kind of wizard shit? Fuck it. Where'd you get the walking staff? Okay.
Oh, I don't know. Who cares? Just move on.
The other thing was I watched this split-brained thinking, one, it's a D&D movie, but two, this is actually an isekai about Michelle Rodriguez.
What now?
An isekai is a Japanese anime in which a person is teleported to a fantasy realm from the real world. So I imagine Michelle Rodriguez's Letty character from Fast and the Furious actually was teleported to D&D and has just forgotten. She's so drunk and hammered that she's just forgotten and is a barbarian now.
She just rolls with anything.
I was like, dude, this would be great if Vin Diesel showed up at the end.
Yeah. She's not much different from Letty.
Also, the movie is all about family. Yeah, so, I mean, there's a lot of La Familia in this.
Just got to get some
you
Corona
make that joke,
in there.
But yeah, Vin Diesel loves Dungeons and Dragons.
Yes,
like,
really?
If they called him, he would be in a second. He would be in right away.
Was he the voice of the fat dragon?
Like the Iron Giant.
Or like he is Groot in fucking Guardians of the Galaxy.
God.
You know, like,
Could be any of those.
Well, and they had a lot of crossovers, two different Chris's playing the lead role. And
yeah.
Well, every major Hollywood lead actor is a blonde guy named Chris now. So there are only so many options.
I was trying to tell Sasha about the movie, and she was like, I was like, yeah, it's got Chris Pine in it. She's like, Chris Pine, is he that guy that's in that new Apple TV show? And I was like, no, that's Chris Evans. And she's like, Chris who? Like,
the guy that plays Thor? No, that's Hemsworth.
She was like, is that Captain Marvel? And I was like, no, that's not Captain
Brie
Marvel.
Larson. That's funny. Chris Pine is the best Chris, though. Like, by far, I think. And I kind of wish he was. It seems like he's just not doing as much over the past few years. And I wish that he was in more big blockbusters like this to like make them palatable. Like if like Chris Pratt was in this instead, this would have been just god awful. And like Chris Pine makes this movie tolerable for me, where I'm like, all right, like I'm enjoying this. He's cracking jokes. He's a likable guy. Like I'm cool with this. But if they had a lesser Chris, that would be it would be harder to stomach.
Also, did he sing his own songs? Because it was pretty good. Like, if
that's a good question. I don't know.
It sounded like it was him.
Yeah, I was just like,
Yeah,
oh
it probably
damn,
was.
he's pretty solid. I want to say real quick, Ryan, I know you have a list of topics we could talk about here, but I was looking on IMDb and I looked under the goofs section because I wanted to know who noticed goofs in D&D. And under the goof section, there was one thing in particular. I want to pull this up just so I can read it to y'all verbatim. It is... In Dungeons & Dragons, bards are basically a jack of all trades who straddle the line between classes. They have some rogue abilities, are competent fighters, and they have access to magic spells that can damage, heal, and even transform themselves into different animals. Edgin would have been much more useful than a planner and whacking people with his loot. So they took exception with the fact that Chris Pine didn't do all the things a bard would normally do in the movie.
That's pretty crazy, actually, because I was about to make this argument that Chris Pine is not a bard in the movie, but his description, or that person's description of
it was you, wasn't it?
A bard. Well, no, that's like Chris Pine does a lot of that stuff. He does a little bit of roguishness. He does a little bit of fighting. So he doesn't actually have magic music. But you can
cheers people up with it.
His
It's
music
fine.
as inspiration.
Yeah.
I think bard, I think charisma. You need to play songs and be
Exactly.
charismatic, and it's fine.
And that's what he does.
But you just calm down, people. Okay, it's a D&D movie.
Yes.
You can go play the game and have all your rules, and everything is fine.
Chris Pine really pulled the whole movie along. I agree.
Yes.
He was really, really good. It perfectly fit.
He needed back insurance for how much he carried.
Yeah. I got a lot of Jack Burton, Big Trouble in Little China vibes, where he's the main character, but everyone else is doing all of the work.
Yes.
Yeah, I think they acknowledge that too.
The fact that he's just I plan. That's what I do. I'm just here to plan things.
Right.
And when we don't,
When the plans fail,
that was
All
also
the plans.
a great gag. So your plans fail, all your plans.
The plan C
are we
and the
back
plan
on plan
D.
A?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was really good too, actually. The fact that they had I started to notice okay, well, one of these plans is going to be redundant if they need to really do this. But the way that they utilized that as a little bait and switch.
I will say I appreciate they did not just do MacGuffin. All of them work.
Yes.
And it was MacGuffin, no, this doesn't actually work. Let's make another MacGuffin. And have the parallel MacGuffins.
Yeah, I was gonna say as an adaptation, it was kind of in my theme anyway. We'll probably talk more about it as an adaptation in general anyway. While it did have a lot of the D&D things in it, it didn't try to stick so hard to the rules, right? And that I think that someone could say, oh, bitch about, oh, he's not really a bard, or druids can't do all of those transformations like that. But within the realm of the movie, that was a really fucking awesome scene. And if you actually, the DM can set how you play a game, and they can tweak the rules as they want. And if they're like, hey, actually, it would be cool if you turned into 9 things and one of them was a deer because we set that up as a funny joke, let's just do that. You can, right? And so I think that I like that they didn't try to stick so hard to being hard fantasy, let's just follow it like it really is, but then still wanted to acknowledge this is the world, these are real places, these are real people.
I mean, that's okay. When we talk about fantasy and we talk about adaptations too, this is actually something I really wanted to dig into, because we're talking about Mario Brothers movie. They have a checklist of things. It's they have to get through and show you all of this shit. That's how you know Mario is Mario. D&D to me has always been, it's like a pool or an ocean where you can step in at any point and there's just lore everywhere. And what do you exactly pull? What stories? So these characters, when you adapt from D&D, you can adapt, Parker was saying, oh, well, this is a fan favorite, and this is a fan favorite, and this is a fan favorite. But then the characters themselves can be blank slates, and so you can work from that, which unfortunately they didn't really do too much with the character side of it because they wanted to do jokey comedy, just a fun adventure. But you could have a D&D movie. I don't know if you really would ever have this, a D&D movie where there is a lot of emotional stakes and gravitas that's on a smaller scale in this fantasy realm. Yeah. I think that Hasbro obviously has some say in whether that would happen or not, but it is definitely on the table that for instance, A24 could do some shit in the D&D world, and it would be fucking insane because
like David Lowery directs the Green Knight, but Dungeons and Dragons.
Exactly, but like because there's no overarching, like with Marvel, you have to have these characters and you have to have these beats, and it has to set up to this. Like there's not that for D&D, and so there is this room for different creatives at different levels to actually play with the framework of this and adapting it. You don't have hardline rules to it beyond these particular characters who are important to a timeline. But outside of that, like nobody's gonna, fuck with that. Like nobody needs you to introduce a new character that has to play with those other characters specifically.
And you're not beholden to like, okay, now we're going to bring in Black Panther, and the people are like, well, but this version or that version, or I can't believe you did this, or you changed that, right? Like it's, even if you bring in named characters, there's still flexibility, because even in your, your group, your session, that character is a little bit different anyway, or that city's different or whatever, right? There's not so much that you're ironed to. I will say though, there is no real solid shit to Super Mario.
Yeah.
Like one of the reasons that I didn't like that is I felt like they tried too hard to try to ground it in some expectations that don't really exist around Mario.
The opposite ends of the spectrums, right? Because D&D has rich lore and very flexible characters and storylines and stuff. And Mario is a collection of things that were able to be pixelized when it was made and then became canonized as, well, he's in the Mushroom Kingdom, and that's what that means. Let's get Bob Hoskins and John Leguizamo in here and film a movie.
Well, and I was like, honestly, I think the only reason that they're plumbers from New York is because of Captain Lou Albano.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think the games ever said that, and I don't think any of the other material other than that TV show and then the Bob Hoskins movie had that plot. What cracks me up is that like they're like, okay, well, we got to stay to this canon that doesn't exist, but then we're going to be like, hey, the Kong army that is what Mario Kart is, I guess. Where I was like, what the fuck is this, right? Like,
yeah.
Sometimes they just made up shit, and sometimes they stayed too tight to rules they didn't even need to have. I do think that they played this as safe as possible to set up, if this movie succeeds, we can do something that then has a sequel. We don't have to make a sequel to this. We could. Maybe we just do something new.
Yep.
We could do TV shows. We could do a more like Andor type show where we go really deep into something. Or we can make something for kids, like that just straight up is for kids. And now we have this universe to play in. Like, I do think they played it just right.
I was like, the cynical side of me, the it's Sylvester side of me came into play when I was just like, okay, I know what this movie's doing. It's building a launch pad.
It's testing.
Yes, it is indeed. And the fact that my parents brought me a D&D map from their viewing and they said it was a great movie and they had a good time tells me all I need to know. Has mass audience appeal. They managed to pull it off.
Yeah.
Yep.
Very palatable.
All right, so then on Hasbro, and Parker, I like your thoughts on this because you know that, and I know that these other two don't. The beginning of this year, well, I don't know all the other fucked up shit they've been doing with other things, but specifically with Dungeons and Dragons, they changed or tried to change the license.
Yeah.
And I honestly, it was specifically because they were gonna make this movie. Like they want to change how they're licensing Dungeons and Dragons for games, books, movies. Like they are going to go hard in Dungeons and Dragons, in these next few years. And historically, it kind of was like somewhat for everyone. Like you could buy the books, but you can make your own stories, and then you could resell them, your editions, through their open license. And they decided, like, no, fucking, we got to charge we're like Elon Musk with check marks. Everybody's got to fucking pay now, even though we've been given to you before. And it the community did not take it well.
No. Oh, yeah. The word of the day was OGL, Open Games License. And it just was what allows so people just use D&D like people use the word Kleenex or Band-Aid,
Yeah.
Like tabletop gaming can be a multitude and a litany of different things. And one of the reasons that like D&D has been able to live for so long and been the largest withstanding tabletop game and become name brand is because like they do an open games license and they allow people to have flexibility with their games, make adjustments, sell supplements on their own that can be played alongside D&D. But they wanted to adjust that so that way they can monetize all of that, and that never goes over
Gotcha.
very well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that they've seen this rise of D&D tangent streaming, right? Like we see a lot of Twitch streaming, YouTube channels or podcasts that are playing D&D, mentioning Vin Diesel before. He's done some of this. John Manganiello, how do you say his name? He's also
he just had
the guy from Magic Mike.
He's also super into D&D, and he's had stuff that he shared as well. And I think that somewhere along the way, some executive was like, hold on, what the fuck? Especially it's like Critical Role has a TV show coming out. Of their
Amazon
thing
Prime.
that's built on our thing on Amazon Prime, and how are we not getting money off of this? What the fuck? Now, they've put shit out and really bad movies and maybe a couple questionable TV shows.
There's a 2000s D&D movie that is like $3 on iTunes, and yes, I bought it.
With Marlon Wayans and Jeremy.
That's what
Marlon
I call
Wayans
it. That's what I call it, the Marlon Wayans one.
Yeah.
It's awful, but Jeremy Irons is chewing the scenery the whole way through.
Oh, yeah.
Does he ever not?
That's true. That's true.
That's what you wanted. You hired him for that.
If you got Jeremy Irons in your movie,
why not?
Let him go ham.
I do feel like that was the example of being kind of embarrassed by the source material. Like they really weren't sure what they wanted to do with it. I did want to talk about like fantasy movies because you mentioned it.
Yeah.
And where this kind of falls. Fantasy, I wasn't even thinking about this before I saw the movie, that fantasy kind of every once in a while accidentally something gets through, but honestly every time, because I kind of suspect that we'll see another rash of fantasy movies following this that will all fail miserably. I just don't think anyone really knows what they're supposed to be doing with it anymore as a genre. The ones that stand out in my mind is, I will say, the largest fantasy property, Star Wars, is trying to figure out what to do with theirs, but they've been generally successful. But recently we've had attempts again at Lord of the Rings that no one's really paying attention to, even by the Hobbit, 9th Hobbit movie. We were tired of it. Game of Thrones was a big deal, and everybody tried to make their own version or whatever, and none of them got anything to stick. And even the newer Game of Thrones stuff isn't really sticking.
There's like a prequel show out now, right? Or something like that.
Dragon?
It's just Dance of Dragon, or House of the Dragon, and it's just more incest and more blonde.
I mean, that's what people want. It's reality masquerading as prestige TV.
But I am interested in like why some fantasy works and why some doesn't, and how much it is just, I don't know if it's the public interest. Like it's just not.
I feel like it comes from like treating the audience like with like a little bit of respect. I feel like like John was saying, the D&D movie kind of just like let people, it didn't gloss over things. It just kind of, it took you with the ride and you were there to enjoy it.
It's escapism.
Yeah, you escaped, you let yourself go a little bit, and you just kind of rolled with whatever they're saying is the next thing.
That brings up a great point, Parker, which is when you think about House of the Dragons and Game of Thrones, or you think about Lord of the Rings, and what the fuck's the most recent one? The Ring of Power?
Rings of Power.
Yeah, Rings of Power. Those kinds of things. You get into that, and fantasy becomes work, right? Like when you watch a science fiction film, you're looking at the future, but it's commenting on the present. There's a contemporary message in science fiction. And in fantasy, there's always been kind of a drama to it, and the emphasis seems to have pivoted more to lore, where you're like, and then like Captain Elgor of the 10 armies had the, and you're like, the fuck are the 10 armies? And if you're like willing to go and read in a library, I guess you could learn what the 10 armies were established by King Elrond in like the age of 8.
King Elrond Hubbard?
Yeah, Elrond Hubbard, led by Sir Tom of Cruise. And but like fantasy seems to be misinterpreted now as, oh, we have a lore and that's what makes it important. That's what makes it valuable to you, the viewer, is that there's more here if you ever want to peel it back. But like most audiences are like, don't make me fucking try to learn this kind of shit. Tell me a story that connects with me on this level. And if it has some cool details to it that are set up, you know, this is where Dixon, I would love to hear your thoughts on this, because I don't know how many fantasy movies you've gone to watch. I know you're big into like Italian Westerns and these other kinds of stories that tell a tale that is pretty familiar in terms of a person rolls into town. You watch the dynamics flow in the real time that they're happening. Not, you know, the man with no name shows up to the town and it turns out that oh, the town has been run down by this person from so-and-so's lineage who beget who beget who. It's a Bible basically of its own version. Like what do you look for in a fantasy?
Yeah, fantasy isn't my favorite genre. Like I like the original Lord of the Rings trilogy. Didn't really care for the Hobbit movies. I think a lot of times in fantasy movies, they feel very like pompous and self-important, like everyone's British for some reason. And there's all this like, I think like you're saying, John, about the lore, it's like, they act like everything is so important, and this, it's just this, all these, it's usually about royalty, and I don't give a fuck about royalty. Like, I want to see movies about like noblemen and royalty where they're like eviscerating them and murdering them.
Yes.
And so like I feel like for the most part with fantasy, it falls a little short for me. There are some that work for me, and I think there's a lot of opportunity to subvert that kind of story, but it doesn't seem like that is really done very often, if at all.
Yeah.
Like I've never seen a Harry Potter movie. I have no desire to. It's just not really something that catches my eye when something like that comes out. So I think they can be good. Like I like Star Wars. I loved Star Wars when I was a kid. I think that feels a little bit different because one, not all the characters are pompous British assholes, and two, it's like there is I don't like the characters feel a little bit more grounded to me. I think, and you can kind of like identify and latch onto them a little bit easier than you can with Sir Noble Knight of Dipshit Land that is trying to go on this quest or whatever.
Yeah, there's, I think also with Star Wars, it is a pastiche of a lot of passionate things that George Lucas loved in that time. He wanted samurai films, he wanted like laser swords and like all this other, the blaster pistols and everything. He focused on style and the actual like archetypal story first. And then after that, he made the mistake of trying to introduce lore and explain every fucking detail.
And that's when they got really bad.
Yes. And that's when Ryan wrote a whole thesis on the diner from episode 2. That was like a 1950s diner out of nowhere that Obi-Wan goes to.
That scene lives in my brain.
Yeah. It lives in your brain rent free.
Well, really, when the franchise went downhill was before he started to put lore into it, and when he started putting teddy bears.
When he put Ewoks into it, yeah. Well, I'm a fan of the message that indigenous people can overtake a bunch of fucking colonizers,
Same.
But at the same time, trying to market the indigenous people as a commodity and a toy line is fucking where I draw the line.
They're so cute and cuddly.
Yeah.
But to answer your question, Ryan, probably a grounded story in fantasy is usually what makes the difference, possibly.
Yeah, like latching onto one character and watching them see the hardships. Like I think of another fantasy series, which is The Witcher, with Henry Cavill in it, which now is being recast or whatever the fuck's going on with it. I don't know. But it had like a main character. It has a world lore. It doesn't really try to bother you with that lore. And each episode has an emotional depth to it where they can at least, I think fantasy actually might be better served with a series than with a movie.
Yes.
So the movie, you're trying to introduce too much at once in terms of a world, and you can't really introduce a commentary unless it is, like Dixon said, on like a royal family to show you that royal people are dicks and they do terrible things. And that it's always the common person that suffers because of that, and they have to overcome it. Every fantasy movie now I've boiled it down to is Rocky. And you have to fight your way to the top, and maybe you'll make it. But when you have like a TV show where you can go through and peel back layers different, you can introduce people to the world and take their hand and walk them through it. You can also do these intimate kind of segments where a woman is struggling with a family drama piece, like she's the victim of domestic violence in this world, and how are the rules actually interpreted here, and how does that reflect things? I know in the latest Game of Thrones, they did a whole bit about how it's like supposed to reflect the misogyny of the modern times. But like that statement of saying this fantasy reflects contemporary times misogyny doesn't translate because you're in a fantasy world. You're in a totally different structure, and it doesn't critique the modern times. It's supposed to critique a behavior or a power structure itself, and not like directly one-to-one map over to us and be like, here's what you should be learning. Yeah. So I don't know.
And that new series also does a lot of just like focusing on the royalties, like Dixon hates, which we all hate. Like, it's just not good.
It's fucking bullshit.
on fantasy, it's interesting because I would say I kind of agree that it's much more about the style than it is, and getting lost in the potential depth of lore is kind of a problem. And I do think that Lord of the Rings and Star Wars both kind of just present you with some interesting settings, off to the races with some characters, and then if you want to, here's all this other shit that you can dig into and learn about. But doesn't really make it to where it's like, oh, you don't know what's going on. Which to me, I love Dark Souls. I have no fucking clue, and I think even if I tried to, I would never understand what's going on in those games. Yeah, I have no idea, and I don't try to. But it's exactly that, where people will start being like, oh, well, this was that, and this was that, and I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. I just killed him. I just moved on. But I do think that some of the better fantasy, when we talk about from a good movie perspective or a good perspective, do try to blend in that sci-fi.
We haven't talked about Dune. We haven't mentioned Dune at all.
Yeah, we haven't mentioned Dune, which is successful as well. When they do end up applying somewhat to modern times, I do think it plays better. And like, honestly, Dungeons & Dragons, nothing. Like, there's nothing there that's like really trying to say anything interesting about our current world. But I do think of like Dune is an example of like, yeah, the religion and the impact of this change of government. And I look at like Spirited Away is also like a fantasy, right? Because she's in this other world and there's all that. But it really is talking about nature and man and growing up. And right, there's a lot of things there. Those themes are really strong that come through. And if you close one eye, Star Wars kind of has some of that. But like Lord of the Rings is really, really steeped in a whole lot of that, right? And those are where those end up being very successful.
Yeah, I think what we're kind of getting down to here now is that fantasy addresses spiritual and religious allegorical components. Like, it talks about those aspects of life. Science fiction, I mean, it can talk about those as well, but it seems to discuss more ethical and like both share an overlap in political. And they're used differently in how they critique the systems that they work within. And think about like Blade Runner and what makes us human. Well, in fantasy, you're not going to ask what makes you human, because there are different classes of people, different races of people that exist. And you have like all of these like orcs and whatever else. And that becomes like much more of a social structure. And then from there, it's like, now there's these different churches because there is magic and there is this aspect of, it's not explainable by science, and it's not something that can be harnessed necessarily by everybody. So where does this end? And like, who abuses this kind of power, as opposed to who creates this kind of power and who creates these kinds of ethical questions and quandaries. And it's interesting. Yeah. Again, D&D doesn't address any of that, but it has room to let that breathe and characters to talk about it.
And I think that you could, right? Like, that's what we were saying, is like the setting now is there to say, okay, cool, let me take this little corner and actually do that if I wanted to.
Yes.
So yeah, okay. I think we mostly covered my topics, except we haven't covered the movie.
At all.
But there's not really anything. It's just like fetch quest to joke to joke. Like, it's just kind of like, I don't know. Like, it's hard to really break this down than to say like Chris Pine is delightful. And you know, just the movie just makes me want to hang out with Chris Pine, and that's really
Dude,
what
he's
it
gotta be
does.
The coolest guy.
So like, fucking cool, honestly,
man. I read a thing that he took that role.
Who played the Paladin? Because that was the other one that I was like,
oh, that guy was really fucking.
That guy was awesome. Yeah,
Bridgerton or whatever. I can't remember what his actor's name is, but
the guy that Chris Pine was like, I don't like talking to you.
He like whispered, I hate you, and he heard it. That made for fun. That was kind of a fun moment of like, you have these two opposites of two men who have taken the same oath in a way to be good and virtuous, and one of them whose greed overcame him. And there was a little bit more they could have probably played with, but I enjoyed their riposting and like their relationship. And it's just Chris Pine's kind of fucking vitriol for that guy was really entertaining.
For the straight character.
Yeah, exactly. You needed to have that because everybody else was an enabler for Chris Pine's character. You needed somebody who tried to like actually balance him out.
But I do have one fun thing to point out that I've been holding back on. But
please let it out.
So in the climax of the movie, whenever they're going through the maze at the end, the battle sequence, or not the battle sequence, but
The games.
the games. They show a couple of other like parties inside the group, and one of the parties is extremely familiar. If you watched Ryan, I think you mentioned some morning cartoons and selling some cereal back in the 80s. Everything had a Saturday morning cartoon, including our Dungeons and Dragons here.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And
Never saw that one.
It is pretty ridiculous, and they have a party of 5, I believe, or maybe 6, but they put the characters in it, so it's the characters that are like winning, quote unquote.
I was wondering why the costumes
the ones
are so
that get
shitty
stuck in the
for those
cage at the end.
characters.
Yes,
the costumes
exactly.
are really shitty for those characters.
So like out of a movie, the costuming is very fantastic. They did a great job of like picking all of those choices out. Yeah, those characters are like just perfectly slightly off. And like, they just seem like they're just the obvious barbarian, the obvious like
all the
soldier.
archetypal images of those things. Yeah, and I heard muffled laughter when that happened. And I was like, I'm missing something. It can't just be that they're dressed shittily. There has to be something else with this.
I like that it was there, but not like they didn't try too hard to be like, hey, look, wink, wink. Like it was there and then it was over.
You never would have noticed.
It was just there for the people that knew. You know, if you knew, you knew.
As an adaptation in that cartoon, by the way, the plot is that they're riding a roller coaster of Dungeons and Dragons and somehow get pulled into the actual Dungeons and Dragons.
It's an isekai from the 80s?
So that is something I'm very glad they didn't do in total, was make it an isekai.
I've had so many questions from friends who haven't seen this movie yet where they're like, so are they playing the game while they do the movie?
I thought that's what it was going to be.
And I was like,
too,
no, they're not doing it. They're just like legitimately who it is, like in the movie. That's their role. That's their character. They really believe it. So
if I recall, the 2000 Marlon Wayans one is also an isekai, right? They get pulled in.
They get pulled in somehow, like into the actual game.
Yeah. There's a bunch of that bullshit where you just have to.
And what's funny is that there is I haven't seen it, but one of my friends talks about it all the time. There is a really good isekai book out there about like these kids playing not Dungeons and Dragons, but like, you know, the fake name
Jumanji,
Dragons and Dungeons.
And they get pulled in, but then it becomes like very real. Like it's like a young adult novel, but like one of the kids dies in it, and like it's very serious toned. Like they're just like trapped in this world, and it's
that was the one thing I kind of wanted from this that I knew wasn't going to happen, because again, Marvel Dungeons and Dragons movie was, I wanted better stakes. I wanted a few characters to die. I wanted somebody to eat it and not come back.
Yeah.
And I was even confused. We talked about the ending.
Michelle Rodriguez cannot die in
die,
whatever movie franchise she's in. They just bring her back later with no explanation.
That's why I think that this is the Letty isekai. She clearly is from Fast and the Furious and needs to get back there.
You make a good point.
That's what. So I think that after Fast 10, they really need to just start infusing Fast into everything else. Like, I don't care.
Do the crossover.
I'm down.
Yeah, that was the other thing, was when I was watching it, one of the things I latched onto that I really liked was because they don't go heavy handed in, this is this from the lore, like these are these characters, or these are these monsters. The environments themselves, when I think about fantasy movies, and maybe it's because, again, schlock guy here, I watched a lot of schlock of people walking in the forest. I've watched a lot of mid-budget to low-budget fantasy, where it literally is just get your actors in front of a green screen or an area that looks outdoorsy and have them talk about their lightning bolts and their other fucking shit. There's nothing going on in those scenes. There's nothing that's actually painted in with a passion here. But like, I feel like in the Dungeons and Dragons movie, every environment is alive and different and unique. I remember, even if I don't remember the story beats because the characters are kind of hollow, I remember different areas. Like I remember what the Underdark looks like because of the lava and these different areas and the bridge joke and all that shit. I remember certain forest areas with like the people who live in the trees and the kingdom. It all has a unique vibe to it. And I even remember like a few segments that have just creatures crawling in the distance, like spiders or these other things that have like a weird magical element to them, especially talking about the arena games. That fucking panther thing with the weird forward projection.
Beast.
The displacer beast,
Yeah,
whatever the
yeah,
fuck that
displacer
is.
beast.
It's just like, oh, it like projects itself and distracts you. And that's like a genuinely cool thing to see. Like these are really cool artistic things. Like somebody had to have a great time animating that. That's like when I remember people talking about Pacific Rim or any of the kaiju films. Like these Marvel VFX artists talking about working on kaiju films from Legendary. They're like, it's so great because I get to actually pour my heart and soul into something I care about, which is making a monster that looks fucking cool. Or making these moments that look great, like the fat dragon and the undead army of dudes that keep coming back when you like kick them down.
God.
And those are just like fun moments. It is like Dixon said, like eating a bunch of candy. And then at the end, you're like, fuck, why did I do that? I guess I'll go throw up.
Yeah.
But in that moment,
like I should have eaten dinner instead. Why did I do this? Yeah.
But in that moment, I was like, cool. It's not just a Marvel where we get a shaky cam and a bunch of laser blasts that kill everybody else. There is always something that kind of shifts with it that seems different and fresh. So
yeah, definitely.
That's what I want in a fantasy if it can't provide me the cool commentary I expect.
Yeah. And I do think that like afterwards, I remember the jokes. I actually was like to Logan, I asked him afterwards of the movie, I'm like, can we remember the character names? Because they're exactly like Star Wars names with like vaguely a name. Each one of them. And I was thinking like
Edgin. I was like, what the fuck is that? Edgin?
He's Edgin.
I was thinking afterwards, I was like, well, they were all kind of paper thin. I'll probably forget. But then honestly, like even now I'm like, actually, I can remember what their names were, which is good, right? That's good marketing that they're like, it's stuck enough and it's unique enough. Like they pulled that off.
What was Michelle Rodriguez's name?
Holga with an H, not
Holga.
Holga.
What was Bradley Cooper's name?
Oh my God, I forgot about that.
Nobody brought up Bradley Cooper.
Shit.
I wanted to mention Tiny Bradley Cooper, just like in Guardians of the Galaxy.
Oh my God.
I like when that happened, I was just like, oh my God, what the fuck is going on? Like, should I just get up and leave now? What the fuck is happening? Like it was just played so straight, like it tonally, it was so different than the rest of the movie. They just like slammed on the brakes and like, we're gonna have Tiny Bradley Cooper now, and we're not gonna explain this at all, like what this like race of mini people are or what's going on here. It's just like, and I guess it's just funny that Michelle Rodriguez likes small dudes. I don't know.
A lot of big women love smashing small dudes. Okay, don't question it.
That part. I thought that was actually the worst part of the movie. I like groaned real hard when that happened. I was just like, oh my God, are you serious?
I didn't groan real loud because the dude next to me went, dude, do you know who that is, to his friends really fucking loud. And I was like, yes, it's fucking Bradley Cooper. Shut up.
The worst audience member.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. No, I really like that scene. Actually, I was like, oh, it's a little touch of reality for a second. And it's another fun little twist of, Holga's rage coming from her relationship troubles. Like, not like the fact that, like,
we got that backstory that she left her tribe, and we thought that was the whole
exactly.
reason
Like, she got booted out of her tribe, and now she's pissed off. But really, she left her tribe for this tiny little dude because they didn't accept her or accept their love or something like that. Like, I don't know. I thought that was really goofy and kind of cute, but good little.
Served as like, it was funny that she was like, I'm just going to show him and I'm going to show my tribe. And then like Chris Pine had to sing her a song to cheer her up. And I was like, this is kind of nice, like friend development. I like that.
Yeah, exactly.
He's there for her. Also, the scene where they're breaking out of their shackles and Chris Pine is literally just the entire time rubbing his ropes on the fucking stairs while she's killing everybody. And he's like, we've almost got him. Just really establishes he's not good for shit. Like, he really can't do much.
And just there for commentary, but great commentary.
That was the other thing was Chris Pine's character, while he's a really cool dude, I was worried he was going to be the, to Ryan's point as well, the guy who is embarrassed of the lore and the actual like source material. Oh, because you have a chance for, imagine if you will, this movie with Ryan Reynolds instead of Chris Pine.
Fuck no.
And Ryan Reynolds would have been like, wow, that really makes sense. Doesn't that make sense? Like every fucking 5 minutes he would look at the camera and fucking do whatever. And then advertisement mobile at the end. But it's just like, okay, fine. But Chris Pine did such a good job of being annoyed by everybody in the world and not representing the actual source materials being annoying. Like the world itself is being annoying. He was just like, oh my God, I'm fucking just tired of all of this shit. But because I have been through too much of it, I'm tired of it. Not because it's dumb.
Like he comes with it as the grizzled old man of the series that like is ready for the punches to be thrown, even though he doesn't know which punch is coming next.
Exactly.
Which is just why that intro joke is just so great. Like, he's a Corvidian, so he's gonna really connect to my story, and like you don't know why he's gonna connect. Like you
don't know what
Jonathan's
connection is.
Yeah, you really think he's gonna sympathize with him, and really he just wants to grab him and throw him out a window.
I did think that they were gonna have Chris Pine and Michelle Rodriguez fall in love at the end, and I'm glad they didn't do that. Yeah. But like they also set it up at the beginning where like somebody asked them if they're together and Michelle Rodriguez is like, no, those lips, gross. Yeah. And then like I thought for sure, I was like, oh, they're gonna kiss at the end for sure. And then she's gonna be like, you know what, your lips aren't so bad. Something really stupid like that. I was like ready for that to happen, just waiting for it. And then it didn't. I was like, oh, that's nice that they didn't do that. Yeah, that's
it makes the small lips joke a little bit better.
Yeah, it was a good bromance essentially. Like I think that's good.
For sure.
But so like,
movie that doesn't ship them.
Right. And we have like quote a romantic relationship in the movie to check a box, but it's not really, we don't really spend too much on it between Simon and Doric. Like they had a thing before and then they kind of get together and hold hands at the end, but they don't really spend too much time on it either. So I felt like it was
Well, they didn't spend too much time talking during the "Thank You, You're All Heroes" segment either, did they? So I figured they probably wouldn't have a lot.
It's kind of like a Love is on the Spectrum little segment there for
yeah. I can kind of see that.
The action sequences, like there were definitely those that are funny that stick out. So like the dragon and getting away from the dragon and like all that was played pretty funny as well. Like some expectation where does he stick a sword or a bone or whatever in its mouth and it just immediately fucking crushes it.
Yeah, good subversion. I thought the axe would do something in the stone dragon's mouth and then it didn't fucking care.
Like, nope.
Just went through it.
And similarly, the jumping out with Jonathan at the beginning, which then again we have at the end of the movie where Hugh Grant tries to do the same thing. But even just like straight up action, like I really did appreciate where Doric is transforming into all the different things to get away. That
was a really cool scene.
Even though that's like mostly digital effects, they did a good job of continuing to track what was going on, and you had a sense of like where everyone was and what was happening. And then just the transitions were cool.
Yeah, there was a bit of time where I got a little fooled. Like I thought my brain was like trying to do the math on it because we follow whenever Doric is like running as the mouse into the suit of armor and then shapeshifts into her normal form and comes through the suit of armor. I was like, oh, that's actually her. But then the guards like knock the armor down and she becomes like a mouse again, or like the Falcon, and it just changed so fast and that whole scene tracked it so well that I was like, oh, it tricked me. Holy fuck. Like I thought that they were literally like the actors just waiting in the suit of armor, has a mask over their face or something, and then appears and hey, visual effects and practical have merged, but it was all visual effects and it's impressively done.
Yeah.
The other thing was the movie never, as it follows a rule of threes at times, which I noticed, it's still shortcut a lot of the bullshit to build up to that. So you never were like, okay, here we go again with this thing. Like when they're going through the graveyard asking questions.
I was going to bring this up.
Yes, asking questions to the corpses, which I thought was really funny. Like I immediately had that thought of like, well, if you only have 5 questions and then you don't ask all the questions, what the fuck happens?
Yeah.
And they like build their way to that. And everybody being like, oh, well, I was the guy that held the helmet first and then got cut in half or like did this other shit. I thought that those were a clever amount of misdirects and a clever amount of shortcuts to get you to those punchlines, because it was like, I was like, okay, that's predictable. I know what they're going to do next. But then they would always kind of tweak it just a little bit to keep me engaged and having fun and get a good laugh out of me.
Monty Python quote in that segment too.
Oh, what was it?
One of the questions he asks to try to get through the
what's your favorite color?
Yeah. Blue. Yeah. No, green. And then he starts going off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think that whole sequence was good too. They never really reveled in it too long either.
Mhm.
Like each bit, they kind of had it, and then it was like on to the next thing. Like that's the right level of comedy for something like this. Is just like get the joke. As you're kind of getting the joke, we've already moved to kind of the next thing. Don't worry about it.
There's also like some really interesting, I wouldn't say like super interesting, but it is creative cinematography done in those segments. I remember when they're digging up, you could show a static shot, a wide shot of all the characters digging up the graves one at a time and just fast clip it. That would be how you'd get to the gold of every one of those sequences. But there are interspliced sequences of the camera attached to the shovel and actually moving with the dirt, and like you getting this momentum, but you still know where you are and what's happening. And so there was a lot of stuff that just pulled you into what the characters were doing that I appreciated. Even the bit with the mirror, the bit where they have
that was the other,
the treasure thing. That was a really fun scene where you just get the fucking like portals put on the mirror, and then the mirror
on the painting.
The painting.
Yeah.
When they're trying to pull that heist on the wagon.
Mhm.
Yeah, like
Very
I want to know, Dixon, what were your thoughts for that particular sequence where they're like in the bushes trying to like make this happen?
Yeah, no, it was good. Like all those sequences like that were well done. I thought it was funny. They're trying to portal like from the hill up under the wagon, and like one of the guys is like falling halfway down the hole, and they see Michelle Rodriguez just like thrusting on this guy's legs, and she's just like waving and smiling to the caravan as they drive by.
I completely forgot about that.
Yeah, just them building that shit back.
Yeah.
So good.
But yeah, that was clever, and like they would come back to things like the fucking wizard stick. He'd come back and use it later, and like it did all the things that a movie like that is supposed to do. I feel like this movie is the ceiling for me of what this type of movie can be, like a Marvel-ish superhero movie that is just trying to be candy to get you to laugh and have some clever bits and then move on. Like I feel like it executed it really well. It did exactly what it was wanting to do. It's just not what I wanted to see, but it is like it accomplished everything it set out to do.
Yeah.
We forced you to sit
We got
down
him.
and eat
We
cake.
got him.
Got it.
That was
We
the
got
whole
it. All right.
point
It
of
was
us
tasty.
drawing out for this long was to get him. That's fucking high praise, though.
It's like eating a massive bowl of candy that you like, you know, and then after like, man, I should have eaten dinner
I
instead.
should really take my diabetes.
I will say it's interesting because I do feel like walking out of this, I was like, wow, they really did put their hearts into it. And still working with a studio and a company, like there's got to have been a lot of interference in this still. They were able to get, I actually think, pretty much their vision on the page, so to speak, and through, and still have like, it was mass appeal without having to be, bad or lazy or what have you. But I kind of worry that I was like, I don't know if it's succeeding the way that the studio wants it to. So I'm a little hesitant. I'm like, I'm not sure where it's going to go next. Meanwhile, 2 theaters over, fucking packed house at Super Mario.
Yep.
And that movie's going to rake in so much money on so fucking tiny effort.
They're already
Now,
talking about
honestly, like
sequel.
the fucking Sonic the Hedgehog movies made money, right? Like it's kind of obvious now that you can just like stick something from a video game on it and print money, except Uncharted. Like sometimes they can't figure out which ones are good and which ones are bad. But
Well, that's because it was Mark Wahlberg and it was a casting issue.
Yeah. He wanted to play Nathan.
I mean,
Like,
like this movie, they did pretty well. I think. I don't know what its
it did
budget
okay.
was.
It did really
but
pretty good. But
Yeah,
I wonder if they
think it-
wanted this to be a $3 billion Marvel movie.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
then
definitely. Who doesn't?
Yeah, I just don't know
Well-
that potential was ever there. Like this IP isn't as like popular as Marvel IP is. And I feel like what they did was they put effort into the CGI. They probably paid a decent amount for Chris Pine and Michelle Rodriguez, and they probably saved a lot of money on the director and the the rest of the cast and things like that, to where like they're not putting out $50 to $100 million to make this thing, right? This is a probably a smaller budget comic book blockbuster that had reasonable costs going into it. I would assume. I'm completely talking out of my ass, and it's possible that they like bet the house on this thing. But
can I also just say that you could tell by the "Thank You, Your Heroes" opening segment that Hugh Grant he needs work. Hugh Grant needs work. He was like, when he looked at that camera, I was like, Hugh Grant, my heart goes out to you, buddy. I don't know.
He wasn't on screen very much, so they probably didn't have to pay him too much money.
Yeah,
right. I honestly was sitting there because he's like off to the right, and Chris Pine is front and center in like a bigger chair than everyone else.
Yes,
but a lower down chair, so he was like shorter than everyone. Yeah,
and Hugh Grant's like off to the side on a fucking bar stool, and I was sitting there being like, "Wow, I can just hear Hugh Grant's thoughts over there of like, how did I get here? Why am I not like, front and center?
Hello, darkness, my friend."
If that's ever released to like YouTube or something, I really hope that clip finds its way because I'm gonna put that song on top of it and zoom in on Hugh Grant. It'll be fucking great.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I think this did a lot better worldwide than it did. Like I think it was like the global is doing pretty well over.
I would
China.
assume
this is the next Avatar.
Yeah, it's one of those things. It's like, oh, they love it because it's just like visually very impressive, but then like American audiences were like, Dungeons and who? What? No.
Yeah, that's my father-in-law loves movies that have big explosions because it has less words for him to process.
Yeah.
And I understand that. He's not a native English speaker. So it's like, you want those kinds of action segments. And I could definitely sense, I was like, oh, I would take him to this. And John Wick 4, obviously, too.
Oh,
John
hell
Wick 4
yeah.
is fucking amazing. But yeah.
Parker, any other thoughts?
I mean, really, just like more praise on just like the good job that they did like filming this. The production was really great. Like the pacing was really well. Like it was a long movie and it didn't like they said a lot in it, and no, it didn't like go through a lot emotionally, but they got a whole bunch done. Like Ryan said, they got everything they wanted to out there, and it's a 2.5 hour movie.
Yeah.
2:14, and it didn't seem like 2:14.
Yeah, surprisingly, it didn't seem that. Yeah.
But yeah, it had great color gradients, you know, like you were saying, every space, every
popped in a certain way.
Exactly.
Had a
you remember them.
Vibe.
You remember the greenery of the forest, the red and the black.
Well, Dixon doesn't, so.
I'm just sitting over here being colorblind.
Yes. Don't mind me.
I will say it definitely felt like there wasn't a lot of bad shit gonna happen feel to it. Like
there was no tension.
Cop out. Yeah,
like
no tension.
Yeah,
like
there's no stakes.
The
really.
people dipped out of that Coliseum so quick. They were just like, "Oh, gold's flying from the sky! Like, let's run after it."
I thought like one kid would get his foot caught in something, just like Justice Smith got his foot caught in the stupid little bridge. Whenever Chris Pine melted into an illusion of nothing, which was just a
trippy.
Fantastic scene that if I had been high, that would have unnerved me very deeply. I'm so glad I did not do those edibles when I saw this.
Yeah, I did have that thought where everyone gets out of the Coliseum so fast just because gold is dropping outside. But I was like, the giant red cloud fucking coming down from the sky was going to get them all. Yeah, they wouldn't have driven them out.
Exactly. Like, run from the real danger. Don't just run to the gold.
Well, okay, let me just put on my hat to explain.
It was a commentary.
Let me secure this. They were in the middle of a Coliseum game where anything goes and it could totally change at any moment. There.
So true.
I've done it.
All right.
They could totally believe that was
I've
just
defeated Ryan's Berenstein Bears logic diffuser.
The one thing that we haven't talked about in this, and I think this speaks to, given that it is basically a Marvel movie, one of the things that is super weak in this is the villain, right? It's like Hugh Grant is kind of the villain, but not really. Like he's just in it for a buck. And then there's just this like,
Scarlet
bald,
Witch?
silent red witch who just like stares off into the abyss and doesn't seem to really have any motivation other than just like power. And like it's just like she doesn't really matter at all during the movie, and like you never really care about her or wonder why she's doing what she's doing. She's not on screen very much, and then they just like beat her like pretty easily at the end and move on, and it's just like, okay, whatever, that's fine. Your typical Marvel movie where the villain is an afterthought and not really like, it's like they wrote the script before they figured out what the conflict was going to be and who the villain was.
That is very true to D&D form, in my opinion, that a villain would be defeated this easily and not have this much depth to a certain point. But there is room here to have injected, because there's so much emphasis on family, to have her be an orphan who was scorned and hated this and values individualism. Make her Ayn Rand, honestly. Like just fucking full on
Really make us
objectivism.
hate
Yeah, go for it. And then at the end, have it be, oh no, it's this collaborative effort of a bunch of scrappy people from lower classes who fucking defeated your bullshit that actually overwhelms her. But no, that's not what this is. This is, again, forget your problems at home, everybody, and escape.
Don't we also get a hint that there's like there's a higher wizard than her or something, right?
Yeah.
Like behind her.
Oh, great.
Kinda, we don't really get into
another taller wizard. Wonderful.
She's the
older
underling
wizard.
to the guy that first used the thing. That horn is a real item in D&D as well.
No.
Okay. Well, they didn't really explain it in the movie, so.
No, they didn't.
I don't know what it did.
The Santana Abraxas.
I don't want Santana Abraxas.
From the Columbia Records Club. We all know this.
Cool. Yeah. I don't think we have any last thoughts, really. We can kind of go around and say if we would recommend it. I would recommend it. I honestly kind of think if John's parents liked it, Dixon's okay with it, my kids are okay with it. Like, this is definitely a mass appeal, and I don't really think that anyone would watch this and be like, feel that they wasted their time, or but they may forget. 2 hours, whatever. Like, I think you kind of can walk out and be like, all right, I'll have some, whatever.
It
at the
didn't feel
worst.
like it was spitting in your face, though, Dixon.
No, it didn't.
Yeah, there you go. That's good enough.
Right. So yeah, I definitely recommend it. Honestly, I will watch it again, and that's actually kind of sometimes a rare thing. I actually probably will watch this whenever it comes out on whatever fucking platform it ends up on. I probably will watch this again with the rest of the family at home. And I think actually my son would be like, "Oh, cool, let's watch this again," and he'd be like, "Oh, remember when this happened?"
And now Ella can get in on it too. So
right, and then she'd be able to watch it. So, Parker, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I would definitely recommend this movie. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a very fun ride, akin to Pacific Rim. After I watched it, and some friends of mine decided to say, "Well, that was a dumb movie," and I said, "Well, what did you want besides robots doing a rocket punch into a kaiju?" I really enjoyed the fun roller coaster that was D&D. So I would recommend Honor Among Thieves. Honor Among Thieves.
Colon's Honor Among Thieves.
Get it right.
Dixon.
I would not recommend it. Having said that, if you like Marvel movies, you should go see it because it is good for that type of thing.
Yeah, why don't you go see a good Marvel movie?
If you don't like Marvel movies, don't bother. But yeah, this is gonna be shocking for you guys to hear, but I'm not a huge fan of Marvel movies or comic book movies in general. I know this is
never
a big
knew.
revelation.
We've been doing this podcast for how many years, and I've just never known this about you.
It's a recent change of opinion, but so I would not recommend it. However, like I said, I do think it executes on that formula very well. I just am not a fan of the formula, so
not recommend asterisk.
No, it's a not recommend. But
don't
if you
pull
know
him into my gray area.
Yeah, I'm not straddling the fence like John. It's a no from me. But
man, I'm gonna get this fence pregnant one way or another. Okay.
What kind of fence is this?
It's a D&D enchanted fence.
Okay.
It's one of those
It's
mimic
a mimic
treasure chest.
Yes.
God damn it.
Cool.
God.
All right, John, bring us around.
I would recommend this movie. I've recommended worse, everybody. You've heard me recommend and fight on behalf of significantly worse movies. But this was a fun time, despite some asshole next to me ruining the experience. It was still a great movie for me. Like, it was good escapism. I had a fun time with Chris Pine's character and his charisma. I really enjoyed what he brought to it. I always enjoy a vehicle for an actor that I appreciate and really enjoy their like performance to just get to ham it up and have a good time. There were obviously some qualms that I had with it, but overall just gave me what I wanted. I went in, I did not expect more from it. And I got what I was like, okay, yeah, I came here for this. I'm good. Nice time. So yeah.
All right. Awesome. Well, that can bring us to a close for Afterthoughts. Parker, I want to say thank you again for joining us as a guest.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me.
When we do the sequel, we'll have to have you back.
Yes.
Bring back your D&D expert.
Yeah, and with me as well.
John Garcia. Hold on, wait. I got my dice. I'm gonna roll.
Yeah.
It's a natural one.
A natural one? Is there an
That's,
unnatural one?
Yes.
A natural one.
You know what? I'm sorry I asked. Let's just move on.
It's not yet.
Yeah, get him out of here. Get him out of here, everybody. Eject your seat.
All right. All right, take us out then.
And Michael Dixon, thanks for putting up with our bullshit.
Hey there, movie buffs, TV toughs, and all listeners in between. John here from the Afterthoughts podcast. I just wanted to drop in at the end of this episode and say thanks for listening. If you've got afterthoughts of your own to share, hit us up. You can find us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at The Afterpod, or jump into a conversation on our Discord server. You can find info for this and more at theafterpod.transistor.fm. Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you on the next episode.